Hi everyone, we're live with EdTechTeam Online. So excited to be with you today to talk about flipped and blended learning. My name is Dominique Dines. I live and work in Guadalajara, Mexico, and I'm so excited to be part of our hangout today. We have Tracy Purdy, who's also the director of EdTechTeam Online. She's going to be running our back channel, so please, if you have questions, go ahead and write them either in the Q&A in the YouTube feed if you're watching live, or go ahead and you can tweet out what you're learning, any questions you might have, just using our hashtag EdTechTeamOnline. And I know that we have some people in our cohort who will be watching this later. That's totally fine. Just feel free to tweet out what you hear or what you learn whenever you have a chance to watch it. So today we have a special guest with us, Austin Houp. Austin works in Ash Grove, Missouri. And I had the pleasure of meeting Austin this summer at a EdTechTeam Summit in Southeast Missouri. He's an awesome presenter, has lots of great ideas, and today he's going to share a little bit about his experience with flipped and blended learning. So Austin, please go ahead, introduce yourself, kind of what your role is, what you're doing at your school right now.
Yep, will do. So like she said, I'm at Ash Grove, Missouri, so I'm currently the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology, technically all three. And our district's a K-12. It's about 700 students, give or take. This is actually the school I graduated from, which is always kind of fun. But this is my 11th year in education. 8 of the before, I was a high school social studies teacher at Ash Grove, and then ended up here in this new position with them. So, and basically what I do now is not only help with the curriculum development implementation, I also help with instructional practices and what that looks like K-12. And then I'm in charge of all the technology, the Google Apps domain, Chromebooks, and iPads, and all those different things for our whole district. So it's quite a few things, but luckily it seems over the last few years they've kind of blended together. And so it's been neat, and I've enjoyed getting to be in teachers' classrooms and see how we can help them to create the best environment for their students.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like you have quite the role there with so many different responsibilities and just different age levels as well.
Yeah, and with not ever having any teaching experience at the elementary level, it's been real enjoyable to be able to see what that world looks like, and then learning from the good teachers who are in that world, and then helping that to happen at our school. So
awesome, Austin. So with your experience, how have you seen flipped or blended learning happen in the classroom, whether it's your classroom or other teachers?
So, so the traditional flip model, when we talk about that, I learned about that from our St. Louis, Eastern Missouri Google Educator group, which has a lot of awesome Google educators. But specifically, it was from a buddy of mine, Patrick Dempsey, and he had done it in his junior high science classroom. And he was using the flip model. And again, his purpose of it was to do those videos where then kids could be working on it in class. He could help them meet all their different needs. And if they needed extra time outside of school, they could watch the videos. He ran into a problem with the traditional model to where he found his haves and his have-nots actually get worse, because those who had the technology at home were getting a lot more learning than those kids who didn't have the technology at home. And so those kids who didn't have it at home were trying to squeeze it in during class or in between classes. And so he actually felt, for him specifically, that it was a disservice to the kids using just the traditional flipped model, as I kind of described. And I had run into issues with it because I taught social studies, and specifically American government, which is what it was our state testing at our school. And so the reason being is because anytime I'd make these videos about Senate and House of Representatives and presidents, those people were changing. And so I'd be having to go in and making new videos, which didn't make it an easy thing to do on a consistent basis. So I never went with that model, but we went to where we became one-to-one with Chromebooks and started with iPads, but we started using things like Google Classroom, where I would use, kind of kicking it old school here for a second, Madeline Hunter's lesson plan design. And her idea specifically of the anticipatory set, like Dave Burgess would call the hook, or a lot of people call the bell ringer. So what I did was I designed my lessons to have what I called the flavor of the day. using the Baskin-Robbins 31 flavors here out of US. So, so then what I would do on there is I actually took what textbooks did well. They design their units very well in this regard. You know what vocabulary you need to know, you know the essential questions you need to know, and it is super easy to follow that aspect. The problem we run into is, well, those textbooks come out of date pretty quickly. So, at least within my content area. So what I did was I took the things I liked. So on my flavas, I would post them on Classroom, and it kind of evolved, and I'll talk about that evolution here in a second, but I would have the key vocab terms for the day, or for the 2 days, depending upon how the lesson was designed, and then the key questions that we would cover. So back in the day, pre-technology, my kids would do it on sheets of paper and turn it in, and in theory, I'd go back and look at it. But that being theory, because I didn't really have time being football coach and basketball coach and all that stuff. So, but then as we got more technology, one of the things that my kids ended up doing was they would create a Google Doc where they would share it with each other, and then they would define those definitions together, which that's the DOK 1 and 2 stuff. Like, if you can Google it, it's DOK 1 and 2. The memorization generally is not as important in that regard. And I noticed it allowed us to get to that DOK 3 and 4 so much quicker. And when kids didn't know the definitions or the basic DOK 1 and 2 questions, then they would have a doc that everyone has worked on together to reference. So no one felt like they were insignificant, because I could always say, well, hey, it's in the doc. Didn't someone share that with you, right? What was cool about it, though, is I could include, links. I could include videos. I could have them create things to where, okay, well, here are the vocabs and here are the questions. What I want you to do is create a slide and then be able to display that for us to where we can learn from that. From that, I was able to still do, I stopped doing lectures and I started doing discussions. And I think that's a big difference there. Because the lectures were kind of that sit and get, where I was the person with all the world's knowledge, which is not true. But and then the kids just sit and get it. What ended up happening, though, is the kids, they would become those DOK 1 and 2s, and it was my job to ask them questions to be able to find the connections between those vocab terms, or how they're involved in the questions, or for them to become the researchers, because I found the kids actually asked questions I didn't know the answers to, because they became those question builders. And so literally what I would be is like, that's a great question. Can you Google that for me? And as soon as you find it, interrupt me, and then we'll get that thing close up that question or whatever. And what was cool about it is I wanted my kids to become those discovery learners, which is one of those old teaching techniques, to where they're not going to know. They may not have everything memorized, but they have memorized how to find everything, which was a big thing. I want them to have the skills to find the answers that they needed. So, and through going one-to-one and using the Classroom, like, that became super easy. And what was cool, doing things like Google Classroom, the reuse post option, because it doesn't just automatically blast it like it does like on Blackboard or Moodle, it makes you relook at it. It made me reevaluate the links. Because again, that was what I didn't like about textbooks, is they didn't stay up to date. I could put in new links that fit the questions or the key terms that we're wanting to cover, and then I would be able to post it that way. The other thing that was kind of cool, and then I'll let you guys get to me asking questions because I've been rambling, is kids would find their own resources, and they'd be like, "Hey, coach, I found this," and I'd be like, "Awesome!" Post it on Classroom. And so then I would make that, and that would become one of the resources that everyone could use. So it wasn't like, again, I was the purveyor of all the resources. They became kids who could be able to find their own answers in those situations.
Yeah, I love all the collaboration that you're talking about. That's huge.
Yeah, and it was tough at first, because again, my class, my flavas were, let's just call a spade, they were participatory points, and as I started evaluating my grading system, I noticed that about 60% of my grading was participation. Things that I never even really looked at, just being honest. So I scaled that back, and then my kids were like, why are we all doing the same thing in terms of these definitions? I was like, that's a great question, because here's what I found. The kids would never answer the DOK 3 and 4 together until we had the discussion. because they were like, man, this is deep stuff. The DOK 1 and 2, they'd find that real quick. But then you could start through the discussion, getting them to develop those answers and asking, as you know, that pedagogy says, those guiding questions to be able to get them to not only ask better questions and then find the answers themselves as well.
Yeah, I love how you're giving your students that empowerment piece where they can, you know, find their knowledge and they can share that with others, and you're not the sage on the stage kind of thing, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the tools you mentioned multiple times is Google Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other tools or maybe digital resources that come to mind when you're thinking?
Yeah, and so some of the other things that I used, so I used, so again, we're Chromebook Google based. So we used Google My Maps, and that one, which actually is really cool to kind of use that same concept, and you're talking about the collaboration piece, was that I got my kids to I had my kids use Google My Maps to where they collaborated with kids in Japan, China, Turkey, South Africa, and throughout the US on things like, so we would do, in my world geography class, we would do natural disasters, where they would make a natural disaster poster, right? Because that's just traditional, it's what you do. And the point of it was to be able to see the devastation that a natural disaster could have. Well, then I was like, well, why don't we have other students around the world do the same thing with us? Because they're probably studying the same stuff. And they do it in their region of the natural disasters. And then here's where we took it to that next level, because we were able to get through that DOK 1 and 2 stuff real quick. How did the governments respond to that stuff? And we could see how they would respond in China and Japan as opposed to South Africa or the United States. And so not only was it collaboration together, but then it became a collaboration with students outside the United States, which was really awesome. Some other tools that we used a lot was like the cultural, I can't think of what it's called right now, the Google Cultural
Institute?
Institute, with those resources that were awesome. And my wife, this with her 20 time stuff that she's been doing, but and her English, she's been having them do Google Cardboards to be able to immerse themselves in specific places, to get a feel. So, you know, hey, this is what Mexico, you know, verbally, this is what Mexico looks like. How about we go with a 360 and actually view all around and see what it looks like? So again, kind of that immersion. And then Dom, you got to meet with my wife's kids, and that was a cool thing because my kids were able to talk to someone, with you being from Minnesota and now living in Mexico, just that cultural difference. And so bringing in other people, that was something that her kids just absolutely loved that. So, and that was, again, just kind of using a Google Hangout. So.
Yeah, and that actually fits perfectly with this global cohort that we have. Our first course in this unit was global connections and like leadership and collaboration. And so a lot of the students have already tried something new.
That's awesome. And it's amazing. What blew me away was how many educators are out there who want to do this. Like, it's not like you're reaching for straws. Like, there's people out there ready to collaborate with you. You know, you just have to be willing to maybe have a different timeline than you're used to having in your curriculum, because not everyone's in the same spot. And that was a big thing that I had to learn was, you know, I may do it during this week, but like, for example, Maria Venturino out of California, she was having her kids do the natural disaster thing as well, but she didn't do it till the end of the unit. So we had to come back and revisit that, so that way it fit within hers, but we still got awesome information out of it. So it made our curriculum a little bit more flexible. So.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Austin, we've got a few people watching that are loving what you're saying. What I just want to bring up too, Dominique brought this up, that our first unit was on global collaboration and community. Then we did a unit on project-based learning. And what you're really showing is that you're bringing everything using resources like My Maps and Google Classroom. All of these resources are really making your curriculum relevant and making your students be a little bit more engaged. Do you have any other feedback for people on ways that you can get students more engaged in your classroom with flipped and blended learning?
Yeah, so and I presented on this at the virtual summit this past weekend. I think if you want blended learning, project-based learning, like all those concepts to be successful, you're going to have to put the emphasis on DOK 3 and 4 type questions and that type of stuff. Because if you're just going to do DOK 1 and 2, kids are going to get it done in 15 minutes tops, and there's no engagement there. And the second piece of that, and this is, I think, that something my wife has done even better than I have with her 20-time projects, is that passion, the kids' passion. And the moment that they can own their passion with those DOK 3 and 4 type questions and assignments and projects, then they're able to take it to a level that you weren't prepared for. And so, like, for example, she had one of her kids, and it wouldn't be a kid that you would say is academic. And this kid literally built a smoker, like to smoke meat and stuff. Like, Crafty would so be excited about it. But and it was one of those things, like, this is an English class. You're like, how does this fit in? He had to document the whole process, his learning, and be able to share out how to do that. And it still fit within the ELA aspect of being able to use descriptive words and being able to write it in a persuasive way or whatever. But what it was is the passion, and then, okay, don't just tell us about a smoker. How about you make one? You know, those types of things.
No, that's awesome. I don't know, Tracy, if we've had any other questions come in.
I'm just a little bit curious also, as a teacher standpoint, when you're flipping to, or you're moving to either flipping or blending your instruction, how does that affect you as the teacher? Does it save you time? Does it increase time? Are there other benefits for you as the teacher?
So mine, and I think it was Wendy, and I think Dom, you talked about Wendy having this, like, that one new thing concept. And I was talking to one of my teachers, actually a new teacher this year, and she wants to go completely paperless. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I said, but here's the issue. Do you know the content really well? You know, because if you don't know the content really well, it's hard to go paperless, you know? And I was like, what's going to be that one new thing that you're going to do? So for me, it was about a 6-year process to get where I was last year as a teacher, to where I was doing so much more of this collaboration. And some of it was kind of heavy at the beginning in terms of, like, a kind of learning how to use the tools, and then setting up my lessons, knowing they looked a little bit different because it was no longer isolated learning for the kids. It was now collaboration. How do you assess that? What do assignments look like in that regard? And how do you make it to where you can grade it quickly? Because research shows, thank you, Hattie, for this, is that feedback, when it is timely and quick, that's when you're going to see the most student growth. And so it's trying to figure out ways to where you're doing your projects to where you can provide assessments throughout to give kids that feedback right now. You know, and as someone who's been a coach, you know, for 13 years plus, why we love sports is because you get a whistle every time that you mess up, so you can correct it right then. I think too many times in education as teachers, we wait for a week or 2 weeks to provide that, and then we wonder why the kids haven't ever fixed it, because they've already moved past that issue. So, and so it was kind of heavy initially, but it definitely, due to necessity of the amount of things I was responsible for, it became a thing to where it actually did make my life easier because of technology, really, and being able to provide quick feedback in a timely manner.
Yeah, and I think a lot of teachers find that maybe it is a little heavy at the beginning, but then once you kind of get the system figured out and everything, it ends up being maybe less work, or maybe more efficient for the teacher.
Because it is more efficient, because you look at, like, my response, like, and you guys kind of made fun of me for all of my jobs I'm responsible for now, but like last year I was high school social studies teacher. I had a student help desk where we repaired all the Chromebooks in the school district. I was also in charge of the Google Apps domain. I was head girls basketball coach, and then I was junior high football coach. Like, I also had 2 kids, and my wife has a horse business on the side. So, like, I didn't have time to be sitting at home grading. So what I found was ways to do all these things to where it made my life so much easier, because, again, I didn't want to be waiting a month to give kids feedback. I needed to give it to them within a day or 2. And so I had to develop those tools within my class to be able to do that. And technology has been the biggest way for me to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we agree, and I think lots of teachers would agree with you for sure. I haven't seen any other questions come in. Tracy, I don't know if you've seen anything on the Twitter feed, but we would love for people just to connect with Austin following the Hangout. If maybe something occurs to you or you're watching this later and not live, Austin, can you just share your Twitter handle with us?
Yeah, absolutely. It is at Coach Houp. Let me see. I'm gonna put that on the tagline there.
Perfect.
There you go. At Coach Houp 24. And obviously, they're more than welcome to catch up with me, send me any questions, thoughts. I love to hear how other people are doing it, and especially I think for me the biggest concept is learning how it looks in the elementary level, and so that's my biggest thing where I'm looking at right now is learning how can these blended models look like in the K6 type grade. So
yeah, and I think that you bring up a great point that we're always learning. No matter where we're at,
yeah.
journey. I mean, whatever we've tried or what risks we've taken, it's a constant journey. So.
And I got to be honest, I used a couple tools, and it went over, for lack of better words, like a pregnant pole vaulter. I mean, it just did not go well. But it was great, is because I was able to tell the kids, yeah, I'm sorry, that didn't work the way I thought it would. Can you guys give me feedback on what it would look like if it were to work successfully? And then I was able to find other tools based upon that met their needs and still met my learning objectives for that time period.
Yeah, and I think that's great. We're that example that it's okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, Tracy, unless there's anything else that's come in.
Nope, there aren't any more. I just want to say thank you so much, Austin. Do you have any last advice for people that are thinking, during this course, they are going to be creating at least 2 flipped or blended units, and any advice as they start?
Yeah, so I think this is a true concept that even schools need to make sure they're doing. Beta test it. Don't tackle all your classes, all your units at once. Like, tackle one. Find out what did you like, what did you not like, and be reflective. And from that, because what I had elective classes where I could try out these tools. I didn't do it in American government first. I always tried it in another class first. And if I liked it, I used it in American government. If I didn't, I cataloged it and moved on and tried something else. So, that's what's great about doing, like you guys having a lesson or two that you're going to be designing with that blended concept is, don't try to tackle all your units. Tackle one, see what it looks like, and then later on try to tackle another one based upon your own personal reflective feedback.
That's great advice. Yeah, just take one step at a time with this as you're trying new things. And so thank you so much, Austin, for sharing your expertise and just your passion for education and sports and everything else you do. But yeah, we really enjoyed having you with us today live, and we'd love to just stay in touch with any other questions that come up, and we hope to see you online soon.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me here.
Yep.